Happy New Year and happy championship week if you're unfortunately still playing in week 18. And if you are, you may not have the stud quarterback who carried you all season long. But if you're in that boat, I got you covered. I'm going to talk about every quarterback here, tell you which ones you should start, which ones you should sit, and which ones you may not have here in championship week. So if you watched our running back wide receiver video, you know this week we're just doing tiers. We're not going to go game by game because there's way too many, variables involved in the game. So I'm going to start with the tier that we started with in the other videos, and that is the quarterbacks that you likely can't play this week, even if they're studs. We got to start with Josh Allen of the Bills. The Bills have the number 2 seed locked up. They're going to rest their starters. Now, you're going to see a report that Josh Allen is going to start. Don't fall for this. It's just to keep his consecutive start streak alive. That's hard to say. So he's going to go out there. He's going to play a few snaps just to get the start and keep his streak alive. And then he's going to get benched. You can't play Josh Allen. You also can't play Jalen Hurts, who is still, shockingly, in the concussion protocol. But also, Sirianni already said they're resting the starters. They're not going to let Barkley go after the record, which is unfortunate. But they're putting the team first, I guess. And that means even if Jalen Hurts clears the concussion protocol, and even if they decide to play him because they don't want him to be too rusty, he's not going to play a whole lot in this game, if at all, so you can't start Jalen Hurts either. And now a tough one is Jaden Daniels, because head coach Dan Quinn said they are going to try to win, and they do care about the seeding, even though I think they're going to be either the 6 or the 7 seed, so I'm not sure why it's so important to them. This is definitely risky. I mean, look, Jaden Daniels, we know he has the upside, but there's also the risk that he only plays a half of football this week because, again, the Commanders aren't really playing for anything of significance this week, so look, Quinn is saying they're going to start the starters. If you want to roll with Jaden Daniels, go ahead, take the risk, but he's also very risky, could play a half or less of football here. And you definitely can't play Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid already said they're going to sit him and the starters. Carson Wentz is going to start, but that doesn't mean I want to play Carson Wentz either because he's going to be out there with the backups, and he's Carson Wentz. And CJ Stroud, again, D'Amico Ryan saying they're going to play the starters. I think because they've been so bad, he wants to get the starters out there and see if they can kind of right the ship. But the Texans have nothing to play for. They're the 4 seed no matter what happens this weekend. So you can't expect CJ Stroud to play the entire game here. That just seems crazy. Not to mention, even when he plays an entire game, how good has he really been? I think he's too risky this week and not really worth the upside. And Matthew Stafford, again, hasn't even been that good. And Sean McVay already saying they're going to rest the starters. So, yeah, just pass on Stafford. And then Brock Purdy looked like he was going to be a strong start, but, of course, had that elbow injury right at the end of the game last week. It's nothing serious, but Kyle Shanahan is erring on the side of caution, saying he's probably not going to play. So, unfortunately, not going to have Brock Purdy this week. And then I'll say Justin Herbert is tough because Jim Harbaugh is talking like they're going to play, but kind of like the Commanders, they really have nothing to play for here. It's just seeding. They're going to be like the 6 or 7 seed, I think. So I don't really understand this at all. I mean, it's like, do you want to play the Bills or the Ravens? Is it really one better than the other? I don't think so. But it's Jim Harbaugh. You never know. Maybe they'll play the whole starters. But again, I don't think Justin Herbert has the kind of upside I want to take a chance on. Where if he only plays a half of football, I really regret it. And then finally, same thing about Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur is saying they're going to play the starters. They're going to try to win, even though, like the Commanders, they can only get the 6 or 7 seed. But again, Jordan Love, how good has he even been when playing a full game? Do you really want to take the chance here that he only plays a half of football and you get crushed? I wouldn't. I think you just got to sit him this week. All right, but let's go on to the quarterbacks you can feel at least good about this week, at least good about that they're going to play all game. And let's start with the must starts, and you got to roll out Lamar Jackson this week. He's got to be the strongest of the strong starts going against that Cleveland Browns defense in what is basically a must-win game for the Ravens. I mean, if they lose, they're still in the playoffs, but the difference here is you win the AFC North and you get the 3 seed, or you are a wild card and you have to go on the road in round 1. You don't want that if you're Baltimore, and it's the Cleveland Browns. This should be a game they can definitely win here. So Lamar Jackson against the Browns in a game we know they're going to play to win has to be a must start. As does Joe Burrow on Saturday in what is absolutely a must win because the Bengals have to win to keep their playoff hopes alive, and the Broncos have to lose. So you got to think the Bengals are going to go full force in this one. The Steelers are, Mike Tomlin is talking like they're going to play the starters, even if the Ravens win Saturday morning, and even though the Steelers will have nothing to play for. But still, the difference here is Joe Burrow, the Bengals, he's been so good. I don't even care who the matchup is. You got to start him. And you got to fire up Baker Mayfield this week against the Saints. Not only is it a fantastic matchup against the Saints, but this is also a must-win for the Bucs. They win the division, and they are in. lose, and then they have to hope the Falcons lose. So they're going to be playing to win. They're going to be going for it. Baker Mayfield playing for incentives. Mike Evans playing for incentives. Yeah, this could be another huge Baker game. And my final must start is going to be Sam Darnold in that game that should be an absolute game of the week. Lions-Vikings Sunday Night Football to determine the number 1 seed in the NFC Conference. Look at what Brock Purdy just did to this Lions defense. I know he threw 2 interceptions, but those were really bad passes. But he also lit them up and had a huge fantasy game. Sam Darnold could do that as well in this crucial game. So Sam Darnold has to be a must start. Now on to the strong starts, and I'm going to go on the other side of this matchup here with Jared Goff. Borderline must start Jared Goff this week. The only reason I don't have him in that tier is because the Vikings defense can give quarterbacks trouble. You never know when it's going to be a game where, you know, Jahmyr Gibbs scores 2 touchdowns or something and Goff doesn't throw for a bunch of touchdowns. But man, he's been so good, and this is such a crucial game, and they are at home. He's a strong start. Borderline must start. And then I'm going to call Bo Nix a strong start this week against the Chiefs. This is a must-win game for the Broncos. They have to win to get in, and the Chiefs are resting their starters. Andy Reid has already said it. Andy Reid always rests the starters when they have a bye week. So Bo Nix is going to be going up against the Chiefs' backups. You got to feel good about Bo Nix in a must-win game. He could run for yards here, throw for yards, run for touchdowns. Bo Nix in Week 18, a strong start. All right, now onto my solid starts. These are guys that, hey, if you had to pivot from one of those stud quarterbacks I talked about earlier, you could feel pretty good about them, starting with Kyler Murray against the 49ers. 49ers defense banged up. Again, we saw what Jared Goff just did to this defense. This defense doesn't scare me at all. These are both like teams that aren't playing for anything but pride at this point. So Kyler Murray, he's got that rushing upside. He's still got weapons. He's still got talent. I think this week he's a solid start. Now I'm going to talk about the Steelers quarterbacks, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, because if Mike Tomlin follows through with his word and says, hey, I'm going to play the starters even if the Ravens win, Russell Wilson has to be at least a solid start this week. He was great against the Bengals last time. Bengals defense doesn't scare me at all. So if the Steelers are playing to win, Russell Wilson will be a solid start. If they're not, Justin Fields will be a solid start. We know he's got that rushing upside. And again, it's the Bengals defense. So you're just going to have to pay attention here if these are one of your pivots. See what happens in that Ravens game and kind of see what Tomlin is saying. Tomlin right now is saying he's going to play to win no matter what, but you never know if that'll actually be the case if the Ravens win. And then I'm going to say Anthony Richardson has to be a solid start this week. Now, of course, this assumes he plays, of course. Shane Steichen says if he's healthy, he will play, and it sounds like he's healthy enough to play. He's trending in that direction. You'll, of course, have to see how this progresses throughout the week, and, of course, you could join us on our Start Sit show on Saturday morning where we'll know all the latest info. But if Anthony Richardson plays this week against the Jaguars in a game that both these teams just playing for pride, yeah, you got to roll out Anthony Richardson. Way too much upside to leave him on the bench in this matchup. And then I don't always like Geno Smith, but I really like Geno Smith this week against the Rams because, again, the Rams are resting the starters. Now, the Seahawks have nothing to play for here, but they're still going to play for pride. They're going to play hard. It's the last game of the season, and again, he's going to get probably the Rams backup. So Geno Smith plays, he's got to be at least a solid start. And then finally, if Tua plays, I'm going to say he's also a solid start. Not my favorite solid start. He's down here at the bottom, but he's still better than the other options. Of course, we're going to have to watch this throughout the week with the hip, but this is a must-win game for the Dolphins. So you got to think if he can go, he's going to go. And it's the Jets who have basically mailed in this season. I know on paper it's a tough defense, but come on, it's not really a tough defense these days. All right, and then onto my SuperFlex options. These are quarterbacks I really would only want to play in a 2QB SuperFlex league, but I will highlight some of the ones where if you're in a deeper league and you need to stream, and maybe you had Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, guys like that, and you can't rely on this week, these are some of my favorite SuperFlex options that I would be comfortable playing in a deep 1QB league. Let's start with Drake May going up against the Buffalo Bills. Again, Bills are going to be resting their starters. He's going to be going up against the second string defense. He's playing for pride here. He runs. I think Drake May has upside as a streaming option in a 1QB league if you need him. I also like Bryce Young this week against Atlanta. Yes, this is a must-win for Atlanta. It's a nothing game for Carolina, of course. But, man, Bryce Young's been good recently, and this Atlanta secondary has not been good against quarterbacks. They've been getting lit up by quarterbacks. Even last week with A.J. Terrell shutting down Terry, J.D. had no problem against his defense. I think Bryce Young is worth a stream in a 1QB league. And then I'll say if you're in a really deep league and you're really desperate, don't sleep on a guy like Malik Willis. He's got rushing upside. He gets this Bears defense that has packed it in, that gives up a lot on the ground. He could run for yards. We've seen in the past when he's had to fill in for Jordan Love, he's got upside. He's got rushing upside. He's got rushing touchdown potential. So if the Packers do sit the starters and Malik Willis is a starter from the jump, like right from the get-go, I wouldn't play him like expecting a second half big Malik Willis game. But if they do rest the starters and he is starting, I think he's worth a stream in your 1QB leagues. So there you go. Those are your QB options for week 18. But of course, if you haven't seen it yet, we got running back, wide receiver, and tomorrow we will be dropping tight end as well. And again, on Saturday, we will be streaming. So make sure you come back, check it out if you're still playing in week 18 to get those start sit questions answered by myself and Pierre.